you on for a minute. Okay. Hey, everybody. We're going to get started in 2 minutes. There's dessert back there. There's coffee and tea and soda. So quick get it and be back in 2 minutes. Hey, everybody. How was lunch? Yeah. Woo! Thank you to staff and cooks and everybody for getting us such nice food. Okay. All right. We did some really heavy stuff. We're going to do some more. Now, how could we talk about trauma without talking about veterans? We can't. But as you heard, it's not just veterans, but it is veterans too. And I'm really thrilled that what feels like my really longtime friend, because he is, Chris Gonzalez, and you're about to hear from him, is that until yesterday, until last night, Chris and I, who have been working together on VA suicide prevention initiatives, had never met each other in person. And I didn't realize this. Now he knows I'm short. But we're really excited to have him here. And so we're going to hear about trauma in veterans, and we're going to hear about some positive things. We're going to hear about how hard it is, and we're going to hear about some things that are coming forward. So Chris, come on up, please. Oh, and by the way, my good friend Chris likes to be interactive with everybody. So if you have questions along the way, Alicia's going to run that microphone around, so feel free.
All right, good afternoon. Debbie put me after lunch, which was kind of an interesting move. So we'll try it again because I don't want to get the head nod of the post-lunch that way. All right, good afternoon. There you go, that's what I'm talking about. So thank you, I've got a half hour. I'm going to try not to bore you with too many slides. In fact, I've only got 8. But I am going to try to get you to interact with me. Because what I'm going to talk about is my own experience, both from my own personal experience, but also thousands what I think are conversations with veterans of different eras, all the way from people who fought in World War II to people who are still serving. So I'd like to get your take on what I'm saying, and I'd like to make sure that as I leave, that you have one thing, maybe not three, but one thing to bring back, whether that's your veterans programs that you're working on, or your veteran policy that you're working on, or a colleague, or you have an uncle or a friend or an aunt or someone that you might want to talk to about it. And hopefully after my discussion, you have a little bit of things to say and can have a conversation a little bit better. All right? So again, my name is Chris Gonzalez. I am president of AG Associates. We are a small management consulting firm out of Maryland, the DMV, as people refer to it. Though I don't associate myself with DC, it's a different thing. I live in Baltimore, which is totally different from DC. It's very different. I am also a 17-year Marine Corps veteran. I am a father. I'm a football coach, or used to be. I'm a fitness trainer. I used to teach tactical fitness. And I just testified for the FDA on behalf of Debbie and MHA. And I'm also an associate movie producer of a movie called Bastards Road. Sorry for my language, but that's what it's called. And that movie is about a Marine who looked himself in the eye, was struggling with a lot of post-traumatic stress, looked himself in the mirror and said, I need to go reconnect with my brothers from Iraq to get better. And so he did. He walked across from Maryland all the way to California to Camp Pendleton, and it's quite inspirational. It's on Prime Video, it's on Apple and all that good stuff, Bastards Road. I don't make any money from it, it's just a really cool story, and I think this crowd would benefit from it. So what my main thing today is I would like to remove the word disorder from post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's just call it post-traumatic stress. And I'm going to give you some reasons why, and I know it's a very accepted term and people use it a lot, and by the way, if you use it when we're talking, I won't get offended. I'm a Marine. It really takes a lot to offend me. It's a term that people use. It doesn't bother me. I'm just trying to move the conversation a little bit each time and have some good arguments why. I'm not here to offend. I'm just here to cause a little bit of, some good thought and conversation. All right. That's me. That's in that picture's quite doctored. But as you'll see, I've spent 17 years in the Marine Corps, and most of that has been in the reserves. So all of my active duty time really is around deployments, one combat deployment to Iraq in 2003, one combat deployment to Afghanistan in 2011, a fun month that I did some operations down in Panama. But for the most part, in the reserves, I had the good fortune of having dual careers. That means I had a military career and a civilian career all at once. And in fact, I consider myself a bit bilingual because I speak military, especially I speak Marine, which is a specialized dialect, a lot of F-bombs. And I speak civilian and understand kind of the civilian perspective on life. And I think that gives me kind of a unique way of working with people. I've been working with the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, for at least 15 plus years. If any of you have been to a SAMHSA event, either for the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment or Mental Health Services, you probably interacted with some of my AG colleagues, Aisha Walker, Stephanie Cruz. And we do a lot of that work for SAMHSA. In fact, the 3 areas of business for us as a company is looking at strategy planning and execution, where are organizations going with their programs, how are they going to get there? A lot of times government agencies and nonprofits. Second component is data. Understanding data and what it tells us, how do we make decisions from it, what numbers tell the story of success. And the third is a little bit more complicated with stakeholder engagement. For SAMHSA, many of you in this room are pretty important stakeholders. But we look at things like marketing and outreach and events to let people know things are out there and available, but we also look at grants and the great ideas and sometimes the not so great ideas at the federal level, and then how they're passed down to the states and how the money's passed down, then down to counties and municipalities, then finally to communities across the country where there are pennies on the dollar and community organizations have to do it, do magic with very little dollars. So that's the gist of our work. One of the other things that I've done a lot of recently and I see recently in the last 5 years, is looking at the intersection of physical health, mental health, and the third component of what I call community health. And I look at that more from the veteran's point of view because I look at the model of stability when in the military versus in the civilian side. But I think that model of the triangle applies to almost everybody. In fact, I think it does apply to everybody, veteran or not, right? On the physical health side, most people accept physical health care is something that's a necessary thing. On the mental health care side, I think we're getting there. I think I was talking with someone last night, and we were talking about how it's moved so much since I was a kid. I'm 46. But the aspect of community health is one that I think is a big one that people don't quite understand. And I think we're getting it wrong in this goofy digital age where everybody's community is online. And I think sometimes we underestimate the value of interconnectedness in human, being part of a community and being next to actual humans and feeling like you're inspired by something and part of something. So before I get started with my soapbox on PTS or PTSD, I want to just throw out a few things to set us on the same sheet of music. First is this big, bold statistic up there, all right? There's a lot of nuances with that statistic because this is a general veteran statistic, and veterans have so much in the way of diversity, not just things like racial or gender diversity, but I'm talking about we look at each other differently in eras. I don't consider someone in the Vietnam era necessarily the same as mine, though there are some commonalities. We look at each other a little different when it comes to branches. Sometimes, we consider the Air Force to be a bit academic. We consider the Army to be the Army. Tanja's not in here, thank goodness. I wouldn't want to get on her bad side. Don't want to get in a fight. And of course, even though it's not something, that's not a very Marine-y thing to say, right? But the Marines, we're a bit hard-headed, but we're soft at heart. And then there's the Navy. But either way, there's a lot that goes into that number. But what I want you to walk away with is that many people have the perception that most veterans have been in combat. And I'm here to tell you that they have not. That's not true. All right? I know whether it's in this room or just a general civilian misperception, that is not true. I will also say, without getting on a tangent because I'll move on, treating people who have been to combat versus haven't been to combat is a different thing. All right? Preparing for combat and being in combat, those are two different things. But we're going to talk general today. So my question is, if only 1 in 4 people-ish have been in combat, then why do veterans commit suicide at such a high rate compared to civilians? Why? Why do veterans experience trauma in a different way than civilians? I think there's 2 big things that we do not know. One is we've never studied, at least I haven't seen a study, that looks at the people's backgrounds before they came to the military. What kind of trauma have they suffered beforehand? Family upbringing, violence, things like that. How does that affect them? I know a lot of them from, my Marine Corps buddies have come because they were escaping things. And I also don't know, at least again, I haven't seen a study that represents this, what is the impact of losing your community or sense of purpose or sense of identity when you leave the military? I don't think we know that. And I think that those things they become a lot more important in looking at veterans and trauma. What I do know is that when people go to the military, there is a big change in mindset. It happened in me, it happened in every single veteran that I know. When they went to boot camp basic training, they became a different person than when they left. And that is important because I think when you do that, you buy into many times the military lifestyle. But what happens when that catches up to you when you leave the military? And that's what I'm saying. Again, if you have questions, you jump right in, raise your hand. You could come up and sit next to me if you like. It's just me trying to throw out some information here. All right, diving into one of my 3 points. All right, Living with labels. Fortunately or unfortunately, we've all got labels. And sometimes they work in our favor and sometimes they don't. But I do believe in the veteran community, we are very proud of the labels that we've earned. The label of Marine will never escape me. Label of soldier for others. The label of veteran. We're proud of those labels. We've put a lot of sweat and work into that. And I don't believe that the label of disorder is one that we like, especially when the things that really have kind of traumatized us, we signed up for. So the things that ail us are also things we're proud of. So the term disorder, I think, is one label that I don't think is a healthy one. I believe that that affects people's ability to have meaningful relationships, and that means with their families, unfortunately. You have a high divorce rate. With going out into the civilian world and making friends with civilians who don't get you. And also with, for those that need to meet romantic partners and everything like that. I believe it hurts, the idea of having a disorder hurts your ability to both attain and then nurture those relationships. Now on the other side, in terms of employment, I believe civilian employers have the best of intentions. But when they hear the term post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, I believe it causes employers to think twice about hiring. How is that PTSD going to manifest itself? Is it going to be dangerous? That's a fair question for people to ask. I can't blame them for that. But it is a question that people ask. Again, I'm not beating up civilian employers. I think everyone has the best of intentions. It's a fair question. I believe that many have the perception that if they admit they have post-traumatic stress disorder, they won't be eligible to purchase a firearm, or they won't be eligible to get a security clearance. I think that's kind of a misperception, but there is that, that's what people think. That's what I've heard in conversation. And because people think that, I believe they bury things deep. I believe they bury things deep, and that inhibits them from taking the first step to get help. And that inhibits them from taking the first step to find resources. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I didn't know you were the time person. All right. I believe the term disorder isolates instead of unifies. Alicia and I talked about this. We connected. We were talking about this FDA thing. We went on a fun tangent, but. I believe that many people across the country are suffering from trauma in different ways. I won't name all the different types, but no matter what, I think that many people are going through something. And instead of thinking, do I have a disorder or not have a disorder, I would love to think about, why won't we just be there for one another to help, to just admit we've all gone through some stuff, that we're all trying to be different, better people or different people. And be open to listening to others without judging and without saying, I hope that this person doesn't, find out about me. And I do know from many veterans, they think to themselves that people won't get me if they think I have a disorder. And that means, I get caught in my own echo chamber or my own, tribe. And unfortunately, it becomes dangerous when you add in stuff like the internet with, a lot of conspiracy theories, and people get much more engulfed into the screen and less into, the beautiful communities around them. So the other thing about the term disorder is it has a big effect when you see social media. Social media is really cool. I get to see people I went to high school with. I get to see, people I used to date, and they're like, oh, they had kids, thank goodness. It's great for social connection for those you don't necessarily talk to, but it's cool to see, him and I used to run around and do stupid things in high school, and now we're both fathers. I think in that way it's great, but when people believe they have a disorder, I believe they don't ask for help. And I've heard this also many, many times, that when they get on Instagram and they see that, you with your beautiful family, they think, I don't want to bother you with my problems. And so I think social media just enhances that. But for me, there is hope. So I'd like to introduce on my third point an alternate approach to dealing with trauma and post-traumatic stress. And that's the concept of post-traumatic growth. I read a book by a man named Travis Mills. He's an Army Staff Sergeant. He is a quadruple amputee. That means he has no legs and no arms. They're all synthetic. And as I get older, I'm more of a crier these days. I used to think I was like heartless, but now I cry at everything. Anything that inspires me, I'm like, and then I get all mad at myself. I'm like, God, you're so soft. My Marine brain. But honestly, I read it, and this guy had every reason to either end his life or just give up. And there were times where he was close to giving up. But he didn't. Quadruple amputee, he ran, marathons and all that good stuff. And I always thought to myself, if he can do it, I can do it. This is only a couple of years ago. But just the concept of post-traumatic growth, I read it, and it just clicked for me. Why not think about how we can use trauma as our unique identifier, as our superpower, as the thing that motivates us rather than debilitates us? I know that there are different levels, and I know that that's being optimistic when others don't have the tools to be. But I'd like to introduce this concept of post-traumatic growth and having a label that people can be proud of, because things like growth and development were part of our military lives, or part of our military, culture. And so why not frame it in a way to where people are growing and becoming better based on some of the things that they experienced, that turning negative into a positive. Pausing for any questions. Yes.
Alicia Run. So my very favorite uncle, I don't know if I ever talked about my Uncle Rick, who was 11 years older than me. We were buds. And, when I was a teenager and we'd go around together and I'd go, Uncle Rick, everybody would go, yeah, uncle, yeah. No, he really was my uncle and he really was my friend. And he was a Vietnam vet. And he came back with an addiction that never let up till the day he died. He died 5 years ago. Talk a little bit about those who have the trauma but will never admit to having the trauma, and they're masking it with substances. Like my Uncle Rick, I used to take him out in the end, and we'd go out, and his doctor, even though his heart was failing, his lungs were failing, everything was failing, said you got to have that 1 beer a day because it'll kill you if you don't, if you go through withdrawal after all these years of alcohol addiction.
Unfortunately, I feel like that's the story of a lot of veterans. Again, the Vietnam era veterans, the experiences they had are a bit different than the global war on terrorism era veterans, but combat is combat. And even after that, I believe people are holding on to the military. They're holding on to something. And that harsh reality, you're never going to get that back, it hurts. And in some ways, people were looking for adrenaline rushes and they did things. And they were looking for this type of feeling or that type of feeling. And when you cannot find that feeling, you will find it somehow. And unfortunately, that feeling sometimes comes in booze or drugs or behavior that's not productive. But let me tell you what is productive. These are things, again, that I want you to walk away with, the practical things. And I'm not saying that these have to be part of your program, but get out there and partner with some nonprofits. There are 50,000 plus veteran-serving nonprofits out there. There's a lot of good ways to partner with these organizations. First one I can't emphasize enough. And all of these, by the way, are looking at reconnecting with military components. First one being exercise, right? I am not talking about going to the gym, by the way, going to the gym and going through the motions. I'm talking about join a workout program that connects you socially with people. I don't care if you're out there getting spicy with the Zumba classes. Get out there to where you're interacting with people, you have social interaction and connectedness, and at times, if you're able to, compete a little bit, because competing makes you feel alive. And that's part of our military culture. So get out there, be part of an actual program, be part of a community that exercises together. Next one, get off social media, go see people, connect with people. I don't care if those are other veterans or your buddies from wherever, or just people that are your neighbors. But we got to get people off social media because, again, it can be a good thing or a bad thing. Get out there and volunteer in your community and let people depend on you. And that does not have to be with veteran-serving organizations. I live in Baltimore City, and I found a lot of joy and fulfillment in working with Baltimore City youth and mentoring. And that has been, on my phone, as you'll see, is Mentoring Mentors is a great organization that I've worked with. Let people depend on you. Make a promise. Keep it. Deliver. Those are all reconnecting with those military concepts of leadership and dependability. And the last thing I got to tell people is reach out. It doesn't have to be to the VA, though the VA does have some pretty good resources. It could be to a friend. It could be to a loved one. It could be to whoever. But if you're that person that is reached out to, understand that the person you're talking to, many times they just want you to listen. But there are resources out there that do help and do help them address those traumatic events that they're dealing with. And I've heard a lot. In fact, people often tell me that vets can't find help. That's not true. It's out there. It really is out there for free, whether it's VA, and I understand that it's annoying with the VA because bureaucracy is always frustrating. But there are other nonprofits out there, community-based organizations that do provide services that can help people at least take that first step. So don't let them say there's nothing out there. Push. And now I'm definitely pausing for questions. How much time do I have? 5 minutes, all right. Oh. We got competing questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. This has been wonderful.
You're welcome.
I'm Laura Evans with Vibrant Emotional Health. And as part of our work as the administrator of the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, veterans can press 1 when they call to connect to the Veterans Crisis Line. Mm-hmm. But we estimate about 3 to 10% of individuals who should be pressing 1 aren't. And so instead of getting that specialized support for veterans and connecting to the veteran community, as you just mentioned, they're choosing to stay away and sort of go into, where we have resources for other people, but certainly we want to make sure that for special populations, we're, giving them the resources that they need and that they've said that they want. Can you talk a little bit about why folks would be choosing not to opt in to, connecting with other veterans and kind of getting that specialized support?
I can. Unfortunately, certain veterans, I believe, have a strong hatred and distrust for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Some of that is hearsay. Others is they had a bad experience once and they'll never talk to them again. So I think it is, that's it. Now, the thing I know in the provider community, and even like things like certified community behavioral health clinics, they are looking for ways to serve veterans, but many are apprehensive to do so because they don't want to do so poorly. So that's actually one of our projects with Department of Veterans Affairs is training providers to be able to serve veterans. So it's one hopefully you'll see soon.
I hear you say it's coming soon. Is there anything that we could be doing in the gap period to help kind of better serve that community, even if they choose not to go into press 1? Are there other ways that we can help support them if it comes out in conversation that they're a veteran?
I think just support them like any other person. And I think perhaps some veterans might just want to be treated like every other person. So I think just be there, be compassionate, and help find the right resources. Thank you.
My question is very similar. We have a suicide prevention program.
You got a good loud voice. Like me.
So my children tell me. We have a suicide prevention program, and we do get a number of veterans who call into it, and some identify and some through the course of the 6 months in the program. And I wondered about the stigma, if that's sort of our understanding, is that they feel a stigma, and if they do it through a community program, then it's anonymous. There's more anonymity there that never gets attached to a record or never, and I just wondered if that's a true thing or.
I mean, I do believe, unfortunately, there is a stigma with the PTSD and living with that. And I think that's kind of what I was getting at with this presentation. But I also believe, I have to believe there's different levels of veterans. And again, in the community, it's different. Some got out of the military in not so favorable terms, and they're kind of hesitant to put forth that they served in the military. I've seen that a couple of times. Some, they attend, some of my friends who didn't deploy to combat zones come to some of my events and they're apprehensive to come, even though they're Marines just like me, but they didn't serve in combat, so there's a bit of a shame. So there's a lot that goes into each person. I think that's probably a person-by-person case. But again, similar to my response here, I think just treat them like anybody else. Treat them with care and happiness. And when it comes out, just say that there are perhaps some specialized resources that person can utilize.
Hey, Chris, thanks. Do you believe that there's something in the basic training that veterans receive that might contribute to not trusting outsiders? You rely on yourself, you rely on your resources. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you an example. And it was something I learned from a veteran who told me when he served, he was taught, you drive the truck, you keep driving. You don't stop for lights, you don't stop for anything, you keep driving. Yeah. So what would happen is, consequently, when you move back here, he's driving and goes into a zone, if you will, mm-hmm. and he gets arrested for multiple traffic infractions, and before you know it, he's in traffic court, and it cascades into a whole series of other things. But basically, that was his training. Yeah. So I'm just kind of wondering if there's something that you found in the basic training that veterans get.
Well, I think it's every good trait without limits is dangerous, right? And so, in basic training, they teach you to literally run through walls or climb them. But they teach you there's ways of thinking that I can't explain that are different from me. But no matter what, I know I can do anything. And I think when you're trained, when you're trained to run through walls, sometimes you just can't turn that off, unfortunately. So that's it. And with that, I will wrap up. Oh, okay, go ahead.
And you want to hear from Brandon.
All right,
Yes.
Marine. Thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
Go Navy. I noticed that you left us completely
We're like
out.
cousins.
It's okay. I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I think it's incredibly important because even though I am a veteran, I'm not necessarily, I'm not a battle veteran.
Sure.
And it's not really received well. It really takes that sort of peer mentality to be able to deliver suicide prevention. Mm-hmm. And I really second what you were talking about in terms of the trauma and the escapism that's part of entering the military. A lot of folks do that. Yeah. And we lost two of my brother's shipmates. We were not even battle. We did not even see battle, and yet we lost two of our shipmates. I think a lot of the advice that you give is really good. I think it's important to recognize that a lot of veterans have moral injury. They identify mm-hmm. the VA with the organization that inflicted that. But also, I'm wondering if there isn't something to Laura's question about why veterans aren't pushing, to speak to the VA. Are there higher rates of active rescue being sent out through the Veterans Crisis Line as opposed to what we do as a 988 crisis stabilization team? I think we de-escalate it over 98%. So I just wondered if that was something that you had heard of, and if not, if that would be something that you'd look into.
So we did the report to Congress about the outreach efforts for the Veterans Crisis Line. They were okay in terms of being, the veterans' reviews of them. But we did not get a chance, and I don't know enough about the data behind the Veterans Crisis Line to really answer that properly, and I don't want to just give you my opinion versus what is, statistically right. I've heard personally mixed reviews of the thing, and I've heard a lot of people say that the care is quality, or let's say follow-up care is quality, but it takes forever to get in there, and that really turns people off. So again, I think people just hear the VA thing, like me, and they say, forget it. No need. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, that was great. Thank you. Thank you. And we can save some more questions for the last panel when Laura comes up, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the CARES Act. Oh, I'm getting so nerdy on you folks. Okay. Laura, you asked a really important question earlier. Laurie Barnett-Levine, hi there. You asked a really important question, and we're going to get to that right now. I want to invite Ben Harrington to please come up. We're going to hear some more from our amazing affiliate leaders. We're also going to hear from Shauna Mulvihill, who is another one of our Regional Policy Council representatives. We're going to hear from Luis Perez of Mental Health Connecticut, and we're going to hear from Paul Jakewith of our MHA in, do I get this right, East Florida. My direction. If you all know me, I can't find my way out of a paper bag. Okay, but I know where Paul's from because I visited his affiliate and it's fabulous. And again, we're going to deal with some stuff that's tough, and Ben's got a little disclaimer. Come on up, and you're going to have a really important discussion. Thank you.
Do you need that? Oh, does it? There it goes. Okay. All right, so welcome back. This is our second affiliate panel, and we're blessed to have three fantastic CEOs joining us. And just remember a short disclaimer. This one is tough, and so we do need you to think about what you have to do to take care of yourself if you need to step aside, because any of the images or the information presented is triggering. We understand, but we want you to take care of you first. So without further ado, we are going to start with Luis Perez.
Good afternoon, everyone. On the morning of December 14th, 2012, a young man killed his mother, grabbed a semi-automatic AR-15 assault rifle, two pistols, one made by Glock and the other one Sauer, and went to an elementary school wearing black fatigues and a military vest. Classes were underway at the school. Approximately 700 were present. Earlier that year, the school principal, Don Lafferty Hochsprung, ordered a new security system installed requiring visitors to be visibly identified and buzzed in. As part of the security system, the school locked down the doors at 9:30 a.m. The door was locked when the gunman arrived. Inside the school, Hochsprung heard loud pops. She, school psychologist Mary Sherlock, and Vice Principal Natalie Hammond went out to investigate. Only Hammond returned from the hallway alive. She was wounded. At about 9:30 a.m., as announcements were being read, as in many schools throughout the country, shots were heard across the school. Students described being ushered into bathrooms and closets by teachers after hearing the first shots. The gunman moved towards two classrooms of kindergartners and first graders, 6 and 7-year-olds. In another classroom, Victoria Soto, 27, moved her 5th grade students away from the door. The gunman burst in and shot her. According to the father of a surviving student, 6 students were killed in the classroom. This is personal for me, as you can tell. My wife was an elementary school principal at the time that this happened. As I was hearing the news come over the radio and coming over on my way to work, I could not help but think, oh my God, this could be Janie. So frantically tried calling her that morning, and of course, they had gone into lockdown because of the news that they had heard. So for several hours, I did not know whether my wife was okay, whether her colleagues and the children that I knew she cared for so much were safe. So we made great strides in Connecticut, which we'll talk about later on, in terms of policy. We're fortunate that we have a state that is responsive in these ways. But many of us live in states that are not as responsive and cannot keep children and their residents safe from gun violence. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Jaquith, the CEO of Mental Health America of Southeast Florida. On February 14th, 2018, as I picked my son up from school that afternoon, he said to me, "Dad, did you hear there was a shooting?" Of course, I hadn't heard anything. As soon as we got home, we clicked on the news, and there it was. The Parkland school shooting was an active scene, mayhem, crisis. It was excruciatingly painful to watch, that we joined, as other communities have, a catastrophe in our own backyard. Parkland is a city of very wealthy families located in the northwest corner of Broward County, and the gunman entered without being stopped, without being challenged. In about 3 minutes and 45 seconds, left the school with 17 dead, 17 seriously injured. As the drama unfolded, and we saw, for those of you who watched it, if you clicked on the news and watched it, the gunman was apprehended, and it was one of the first cases that a gunman who had gone into a school to shoot it up survived it. The aftermath, the reverberations in our community continue to this day. We're going to talk more about it later, and I know, Laura, you asked the question about vicarious trauma, and we're going to talk some about that. But just to give you an example, in 2018, the sitting superintendent, Robert Runcie, was replaced, and it's now, we're coming up on 2025. We have had 9 superintendents in the Broward County School District. The impact was incredibly powerful. The anger at the school board members and anyone associated from law enforcement on down was incredibly powerful, and it was destructive. Honestly, it was destructive to our community. To this day, we're still recovering from it, or attempting to recover from it. It is a long haul. If there's any good that came from any of it, and this is, I think, one of the differences is in the case in Connecticut, it was very young children. This was a high school. And some of you may have seen this, I'm sure most of you saw, those kids that were traumatized by this event became activated and became activists. And for, I thought, one of the first times we saw young people stepping up and saying, we're not going to tolerate this any longer. We're not just going to allow ourselves to be put in this position. As we talk further throughout this presentation, we'll talk more about what's come from it, because our community has changed. we're not the only communities. You know, the MHAs that are represented here, you've had similar traumas, whether it's a community-based event or a shooting. You've all experienced it, and it really has a lasting impact on the community.
So as we were talking and planning this meeting and about doing the affiliate panel that we heard from this morning, we agreed that it was also really important to acknowledge the kinds of trauma that we're talking about here on this panel, and that there's a secondary impact of that trauma that reverberates through our communities when these things happen. Because of course we all know in our work that the truth is you don't necessarily have to be directly impacted by a traumatic event to be impacted by it. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, was murdered in Minneapolis by a white police officer. I'm going to skip some of the things I was going to say because I might not make it through the thing. That was captured on video by a 17-year-old girl who then posted it on social media. And after that video was posted, protests began almost immediately in Minneapolis, and certainly, as many of us saw in our own communities, quickly spread across the country. By early June, those were so widespread that 200 American cities had imposed curfews and activated the National Guard to address it. And more than 2,000 cities and towns in all 50 states saw some form of demonstration as a result of George Floyd's death. We all remember this time, I'm sure, and experienced it very differently based on a lot of different factors and life experiences. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what it was like to live in Minnesota during that time. The photos you're seeing show what was happening in May of 2020 in Minneapolis, including the burning of the Minneapolis Police Department's 3rd Precinct building, businesses, affordable housing complexes. Many of those buildings still stand in ruin today. So it's a constant reminder to people who live in those communities of what occurred. And there's still extensive debate happening about what to do next. Particularly, there's been debate for years and years now about what to do about the 3rd Precinct building and whether to rebuild it or do something different. One of the photos is of a Target store in Minneapolis that was looted during that time, and a building that held a number of small businesses that was burned. Many of my staff members live in this neighborhood, and these stores have never reopened. Altogether, there were more than 1,500 buildings that were burned or damaged in St. Paul and Minneapolis. And all of this occurred in neighborhoods surrounding our office. And one of the images here just kind of shows where our office is compared to sort of a heat map of where all of this occurred. I've never lived anywhere but the upper Midwest. And while it may be cold, I do love it there. And I'm proud to be a Minnesotan. But during that time, a lot of us went from holding that pride to feeling a lot of other things. Sadness, grief, shame. And we felt these things collectively, but also individually, because the truth is that, again, each of us experiences things differently based on our own lives and identities. For me, at the time, part of my identity was as CEO of Mental Health Minnesota. This was spring of 2020. We had just 2 months earlier abruptly sent all of our staff home to work remotely during a stay-at-home order because of the pandemic. And now many of them were not only facing their own thoughts and feelings about George Floyd's murder, but were also working and living in neighborhoods that were literally on fire. How could we really expect them to take care of others, reaching out for support during this time when it felt like more than enough just to try to take care of ourselves? And yet they did it. Another part of my personal identity during that time was as a parent. And I had, at the time, 2 young children, 6 and 8. And, you know, for us, how much did we say to our kids about this, about what was happening? We live in a small town 45 minutes west of Minneapolis. Our children are white. We had the luxury of making those choices about how much to talk about this. But I remember pulling up some media coverage on my laptop, and when my 8-year-old walked in, I shut it. And I thought about, why did I do that? And the truth is that he was already dealing with a lot in 2020, being sent home from school, all of that. But more than that, I think I didn't want his 8-year-old mind to be directly connecting the murder of a black man by a police officer with the images of fires and looting and all of that, because this, and to forever kind of have that connection in his head. The issues we needed to face were much bigger than that. I could say a lot more about this, and we'll get to questions and just, more discussion. But the last photo that was shown up here was of George Floyd Square, which is a memorial that was built up where he was killed. 4 years later, discussions are still happening in Minneapolis over that area, with local businesses and community members and city officials all bringing a lot of different opinions about what we should do there. Because, the truth is we're all in a state of healing and continue to be, but also at a place of reckoning. How do we ensure that our future holds further steps toward equity? How do we determine the appropriate role of law enforcement, including situations where a person might be experiencing a mental or substance use crisis? So we've taken some steps in Minnesota and certainly in a lot of other states toward those goals, including things like expansion of crisis services that you may have access to when you call 911 instead of an automatic law enforcement response. I think it also really underlines the importance of so many of the kind of free and anonymous services that many of us provide in our states, because we can give people a safe space to explore their thoughts, their feelings in a way that they might not be able to put words to other people in their lives. So with that, I think we'll turn it back to Ben for questions.
Okay. Good. Thank you all. I know that was very hard to share how personally these experiences connected to you. So I have a question, and anyone on the panel can answer this. I think you all have either said it directly or hinted at it, the concept of the reverberation effect of the trauma, whether it's, Paul, as you and I have personally discussed, parents sending their kids back to school, start of the school year, or the parents respond to seeing another school shooting in Texas at Uvalde, and now they're starting to think about all of this. So each of you think about the reverberation effect and try to talk a little bit about that if you would.
Just to give you an update, the shooting at Parkland was in a particular building. It just got torn down about a month ago. The shooting happened in 2018. It was considered a crime scene. And until this was why I mentioned that the shooter actually survived the event, which is unusual in these kind of cases. So there was a trial that went on for several years. There was a police officer who went to trial also, who was the SRO on duty at the school. And so it was an ongoing thing. In fact, I got invited to go tour the building, and I declined. For me, I recognized I didn't need additional trauma. I've read enough about it. I didn't need to go see it with my own eyes. And the building was still with bullet holes, backpacks, the way it was left that day of the shooting. I don't want to get into too much detail, but it was a horrific scene. I knew enough that I didn't need to get involved in that. One of the things that happened in the immediate aftermath, well-intentioned, well-meaning people came to the forefront and said, I can help. I'm a social worker. I'm a clinician. And they meant well, but they weren't trained in trauma. And it's a very specific kind of training that one needs in order to not further traumatize people, whether they were directly involved or indirectly involved. And so as a community, we really, in one of the slides that came up, you saw something called Eagle's Nest. That was developed through a grant, and it's to this day exists in that community for anybody in the community that needs help. They offer yoga classes, they offer all kinds of things in helping with the recovery. But we know that the reverberations are not just in that community. And one of the other projects that happened in our community was that those communities without a lot of money, with not a lot of influence or affluence, said, what about us? We go through this trauma every day. So one of our funders stepped up and said, we're going to develop teams that go to those communities and provide trauma-based services. So the positive things that came from it were those kinds of things.
Yeah, in Connecticut, we're fortunate enough that the state funds mobile crisis teams that are specifically trained around age-specific competencies. So we have teams that are for children, teams that are for adolescents, teams that are for adults. So we have a fairly good response ability and capacity. I think that one of the things that is definitely different here is that although Sandy Hook is a hamlet of a town called Newtown, which is bucolic, you know, your typical New England white church, town green, and Connecticut is a much smaller state, right? So not only was the town, the hamlet affected, but certainly the state and all the residents, because I mean, we have 3.5 million individuals living in Connecticut. So it is a very small state. There are cities that are larger than that, right? So I do think that the impact, and back to what Paul was saying in terms of the age of the victims and the number of them, certainly had a more of a profound impact on not just the town, the state, certainly the families, but I think to the nation as well.
Yeah. Shannon, what about you? The reverberation effect.
I think one of the things that comes to mind for me is, and Paul kind of alluded to this with the trial of the shooter, the trials of the police officers who were involved in George Floyd's murder, I mean, just recently ended. So it was constantly in the news for 4 years, right? And so it never really went away. It was just a new little piece of information. And so I think the fact that there are sometimes so many dominoes that fall as a result of something that happens in a community, that it feels like a little more trauma every single time that occurs. And so for me, like, I think we're sort of just getting to the tail end of that piece, and now it's this continued reckoning of, like, what else do we need to do in our state, in our world, and not just it's not just about, should we knock down this burned out building, right? I mean, it's so much bigger than that. So and I think, you know, similar thing, you know, public policy things and things that come up out of school shootings as well, is what what steps do we need to take? And those can be positive, but they can also be kind of re-traumatizing as well.
So get your questions ready. I'm going to follow up after Paul's comment with one more question. So if you'll be ready, Miss Alicia.
Thank you. So one of the things that happened in the state of Florida in the immediate aftermath, and Luis and I have had many conversations about this, there was a double down on, the guns, and, the discussion then became, it turned, well, it's a mental health issue. And I think that's very destructive, because to simplify a cascade of events that all happened in the sequence that they did that led to these murders, to find a simple solution and say, well, it's because the mental health system is broken, is incorrect. You can't mental health a situation from happening. It doesn't work that way, and unfortunately, people don't understand that. Why wasn't this young man locked up? Wait a minute. I believe we still live in the United States of America, correct? And I think there's still something called civil liberties and civil rights, and so to come to that conclusion was very destructive. And then you had certain politicians, I'll remind you, I'm from Florida, and there are certain factions that felt the need to speak about the rights of gun owners, which really confabulated the whole situation. And, every community deals with these things differently, oftentimes based on the politics of the community or the state. I know for you, it was a little bit different experience, but to me, it added to it. It added to the pain. It added to the confusion of the discussion. And as opposed to having an educated, mature discussion, it became ridiculous. And there was a lot of anger, like I mentioned, a lot of anger.
Okay, so my last question for the panel probably goes to Luis, but anyone can answer too. Luis, you mentioned that there were some policy strides that you wanted to make sure we discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. More funding actually was generated through the legislative process for school-based clinics. So trying to catch things upstream so that we don't, throw our hands up in the air after something horrible happens. Also, there was expansion of those mobile crisis programs so that they could reach the more rural areas of the state rather than just the urban centers. There was certainly a lot of gun legislature, banning of assault rifles, of magazines, armor-piercing bullets. Those are all banned in the state of Connecticut and have been since 2012. Additionally, there was some work done to ensure that private insurance was also doing their part in terms of access to care. Things like health insurers were required to reduce the time for initial determinations. It also expanded the qualifications required for healthcare professionals who process claim denials, and it requires the insurance commissioner to get a report from the any carrier that does business in Connecticut on denials and being in compliance with the parity law. This coming year, MHC is going to be introducing a bill that will expand the requirements for reporting, and will also start fining insurers that are not in compliance with our state parity law. And the list is pretty extensive, I have to say. It's a good thing. It also created a fund to improve security in schools. Unfortunately, even though the Sandy Hook had this security system, the glass was not shatterproof. So the gunman was able to shoot his way into the school using bullets. So a lot of schools, and you know, it's interesting because one of the things that I was going to say in the beginning before getting so emotional is that Janie and I, my wife Janie and I, always talked about what, you know, because she worked in an urban area, right? And you have that confabulation of the danger is in the city, right? And here it happened in this little town in the middle of nowhere, really, in Western Connecticut. So I think that was something that really also changed in terms of thinking about it, not just from the mental health, certainly doing something with mental health services, because they're, you know, you can never have enough, but looking at it more broadly in terms of public safety.
Okay. Questions from the audience?
Lori, you had asked that really insightful question to the first panel. So since we've sat through this second panel, was there anything you wanted to share or say?
Just that, you know, I think that there's a commonality, even though all these events are different, including the acts of God types of catastrophes and the secondary trauma. And I think that these events, unfortunately, will be studied for many years to come. And we will learn a lot about mental health and things that worked and things that didn't work. You know, for example, the commonality of the building. You know, they wanted to leave part of the Tree of Life standing, but they're right now in the act of tearing down the part of the building where the shootings occurred. But, you know, these areas are, they're still there, and people still see them, and even if they were removed, I mean, I'd only been in that building like twice, but I knew all these people, you know, and so, you know, that there's that still sense of violation. It's your community, you know, your wife, you know, your town. So there's a lot of just common things I think that we could learn from. I'm not sure, though, you know, it's sort of like suicide, and when someone dies by suicide in a school, you know, I don't want to say that you have to be careful about how you talk to the students about it, because you don't want to re-traumatize them. And I think that that's also true of all these events, that we have to learn how to deal with the communities so that we are helping to intervene and heal some of that trauma like that all of you are experiencing to this day.
So I think you're absolutely correct. I was the clinical director of the Capital Region Mental Health Center, which is a local mental health authority in the city of Hartford, which is our capital city. And we were the first LMHA to have a mobile crisis response team because in a nearby town of Newington was where the lottery, Connecticut Lottery headquarters had been located, and a disgruntled employee came in and shot 3 individuals in that particular instance. So imagine Connecticut, which is like, you know, this really liberal and anti-gun state. You know, we've had horrible situations like that one. So anyway, so we were trained, right, to be able to provide a response to the employees at the Connecticut Lottery. Then 9/11 happened, and we were deployed to help and assist. Back to Paul's point, you need good training in order to be able to assist people that have gone through a traumatic event. But by that time, the whole science had changed. It used to be that you wanted to get to somebody within 24 hours and that they should talk and face the trauma right away. By the time the Twin Towers occurred, it had completely changed, and you didn't want to do that. You wanted to be supportive. You wanted to give them assurances that they were going to be okay, but it was not about getting the story out as soon as possible. So, so your point is really well taken, that, hopefully we learn from these things and first do no harm. But I think that the commonality is the condition of being human. I think Chris talked about it in his piece. It's a human being that is in need. It doesn't matter whether it's what their status in life is, but that human connection can go a really long way, particularly in the first hours.
Well, and I think just like the way we respond to trauma has changed, I think over time we continue to redefine trauma in general. And that's part of why we wanted to have this conversation, right, about the concept of secondary trauma and the many ways that you can be impacted by something that occurs. For me, when Luis is talking about this school shooting in an elementary school, as a mom of little kids, I have a very visible emotional reaction because that feels really personal to me. And so even though I have nothing to do with it, right? And so I think we continue to evolve our definition of trauma, and I think we also continue to see a broader trauma-informed approach to the work that we do, and certainly it's become a piece of the training that we do for our staff, for anyone who's working for us, because we acknowledge that almost anyone we interact with has experienced some level of trauma, and some type of trauma, whether it's direct or indirect.
The other thing, for the people sitting here with us right now, we're hearing these stories, I'm sure, is creating a lot of different emotions and impact for every person sitting here based on your own experiences, whether you have children of that age or you had children of that age or you worked in a school or whatever, that we're all human at the end of the day. This is a real experience. We've experienced it up close. Many of you have experienced it up close. How do we move into another sphere with it? And that's, one of the things that I recognize early on, and as I become more of a senior citizen, I've learned what my lane is.
Yes, you are, Paul.
Thank you. I've learned what my lane is. I know what I can do, but more importantly, I know what I can't do. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, but I knew enough. I cannot go to that school and offer services because I haven't been trained to do that. And I did not want to contribute and add to that level of trauma. And I think we all could take those lessons and say, not everyone is cut out to do that. And it's okay. You got to know where your strengths lie. And I think sometimes, because most of us in this room are can-do people. We'll do anything if it's going to help. And sometimes you just got to step back and say, maybe in this case, not so much.
Anybody else from the audience? Yes? No?
Real quick,
Okay.
if you don't mind, as the social worker CPS in the room, I know I'm jangly. I know you acknowledge that we're probably jangly, right? So I am going to ask you to join me if you'd like. I'm just going to regulate a little bit. I'm going to take my shoulders, I'm going to get them real high and tight. I'm going to squeeze. I'm going to let them go. Then I'm going to take 3 deep breaths. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. And thank you to our panel for sharing with us. And I'm sure they're available for hugs too. And thank you, Alicia. we needed to let go of that, and we wanted to end on a more upbeat can-do, because Paul is absolutely right. We are about can-do people. So Shauna's going to stay here. Ben's going to stay here.
I'm going to move that other chair up.
You move that other chair up. Barb is going to join us. Laura's going to join us. And we're going to take just a few minutes to talk about some of the wonderful accomplishments that have been happening in our MHAs around the country and some more of the wonderful things that we can do. So I'm going to let you guys get started. I'm going to step out of the way.
All right, so you want to talk?
No, you guys go first.
Okay, Barb, you start at that end.
Hi, everyone. I'm Barb Johnston. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy for MHA in New Jersey. I'm part of this esteemed group of RPC people. We love working together, and we love working with all of you. It's been just a tremendous experience. Debbie asked me to talk a little bit about the parity work that we're doing, and it really all starts with access. So we're in the position to get many calls from people who cannot access care. And what do we do about that? How do we handle it? So we're trying to look at all of this in a more global way. And we have new federal guidelines that we feel we really do need to educate our public on. We have laws in New Jersey, and with federal laws also, on parity that have not yet been implemented. We have networks which don't meet the standard. And we have a public that doesn't understand what their rights are. So we are approaching this by looking at each faction. And on the federal guidelines side, we're planning on doing some webinars to educate people on what that means and how it would impact them. So for those of you that just need a 1-minute refresher, we all know that parity is a federal law that prevents healthcare service plans from imposing more restrictive benefit limitations on mental health and substance use than they do on physical health. So it really boils down to looking at a lot of what we call the NQTLs, the non-quantitative treatment limits, and how does that actually impact people in terms of their care. So we are working with our Department of Banking and Insurance to fully implement the laws with their cooperation. So this has been a turn of events that we're very pleased about. We are actively working on the private sector with the managed care plans to address, and we're starting with the low-hanging fruit, not my choice, but I'm going along with this to look at network accuracy, which doesn't address access to care, but it's a very, very good starting point. And we heard from Mark earlier about the phenomenal law that was passed in Illinois around access, and that's just certainly a model to follow. So we are planning also on educational seminars. And one of the other areas that we're involved in that sort of fits under this umbrella is working with an academic institution and partnering with them to educate employers about what are they buying when they buy a benefit. Are they asking the right questions? What are the utilization of their mental health and substance use benefits relative to their physical health care? So all of these are, I think, under a broad umbrella of access to care. And we've formed an executive committee that's moving forward. The last time we passed a parity law, we had a very large coalition, and we're planning on re-engaging that group again to work on all of these aspects together. So I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a great year in '25, maybe.
Hi, Laura Evans, and I just want to echo what Barb has mentioned. It has been a pleasure working not only with my colleagues here on the RPC as well as the national staff that supports this work, but mostly working with all of you and the different affiliates in the MHA family. So I'll share some updates from the 988 perspective as well as what's going on across our cluster. But first, just to make sure that everyone is aware, the FCC did move forward with call geo-routing, which for folks who may not be aware, geo-routing is the ability to route your call to 988 based on the general area, county level data where you may be physically located. Currently, it is routed based on, well, it was routed based on your area code and exchange. So we already have 2 carriers that have started geo-routing, and based on the FCC rules, we expect that 3rd national carrier to come into compliance 30 days starting December 12th. So by January 12th, they will also be geo-routing, and that should cover 95% of Americans, or 95% of individuals in America and the territories. The remaining 5% who are covered by those smaller carriers will have 2 years to come into compliance. The other thing I want to make sure that you all are aware of, and happy to work with any affiliate if they're interested, the FCC has opened a new rule for text geo-routing. So right now, if you text 988, which is a modality available, you you may be directed to a survey so that we can connect you to the center serving your area. This would allow for that survey to be bypassed, and you can bypass it now. But geo-routing for text, it's a different infrastructure than calls. Those comments are due December 20th. So happy to work with any affiliate who may be interested on that piece. And again, for those of you who saw Commissioner Stubbs' presentation, that will definitely help you drill down into what is happening at the county level in your state. What is the true metric of need for people who are outreaching. Finally, I also want to share that right before the holiday, SAMHSA released draft model behavioral health crisis definitions. So these are definitions around someone to contact, someone to respond. So these are definitions regarding what makes up a mobile crisis team, who should be on a co-responder team, what is the role of community outreach teams that we've heard so much about. Those comments are due tomorrow. Happy to work with anyone on those, but those are very important. We're also anticipating that SAMHSA will, within the next week or so, update the model behavioral health crisis guidelines. So again, that is the underlying document that has been so much of this crisis services, not only for 988, but for mobile crisis team, crisis stabilization units, how those things are being paid for. I cannot stress enough how important those pieces are. So please do let me know if your affiliate would like some help. So other things happening across our cluster. I also want to share that Paul, who represents the Southeast Florida affiliate, is in my cluster and was so gracious to share information about the LOSS team that his affiliate operates for suicide survivors and supporting those who may have been left behind. And then additionally, our California contingency within the cluster is always there doing so much great work, but they are working very closely to try to push back against their governor's administration and his actions regarding criminalizing individuals who may be unhoused and or, because those things aren't the same, experiencing a mental health condition. So with the grants pass decision that happened from the Supreme Court that basically said, like, hey, localities, jurisdictions can do that, they are working very hard and planning for the upcoming 2025 legislative session to try to roll back some of those stringent requirements that he has put in, and ability to say if you're homeless, then that's a serious mental illness and you should be hospitalized and institutionalized. So I just want to make sure I shout them out because they're doing great work. All right, thank you.
So my cluster is mostly Midwest and Plains states, and I'm just going to talk about a few things that have been coming up that we've been talking about lately in terms of kind of getting ready and gearing up for the next legislative session. So for a lot of us, that starts in January of 25. So one of the issues that we all continue to face is how to best serve children and youth. And that includes things like a real lack of residential care that exists in a lot of our states, as well as things like what's the role of school nurses in mental health care or identifying things, given especially that for younger children especially, a lot of mental health symptoms sometimes show up as physical health symptoms, tummy aches, that kind of stuff. We also continue to look at workforce needs and try to find creative ways that we can invest in our workforce, find policy changes, legislation to continue to build up the behavioral health workforce in our states. And another issue, of course, is Medicaid rates, payment rates. And unfortunately, this ends up being a very, very expensive thing to do, which makes it probably one of the most challenging things to try to address in our states, but continuing to look at ways to chip away at that too. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Ben.
Thank you, Shanna. What I've got to share is not a cluster update, but it's a affiliate relations update. So first of all, if you are on the National Affiliate Relations Committee, would you please stand? Okay. I want you to give all these folks a round of applause. Affiliate Relations has paid very close attention to disasters and disaster mental health for more than the past year, but it was in August of 23 that what happened in Hawaii certainly motivated a lot of us to say, okay, enough is enough, we've got to do something. And so we crafted a very rough draft of a disaster mental health plan, and it went through the Affiliate Relations Committee in September of 23 and got conditional approval by the National Board of Directors. But it also came with a caveat, some marching orders for the committee. And what came to the committee was, okay, great idea, now we need the committee to formalize things, create an application, create a scoring rubric, create a process for the procedures and operations of such a disaster mental health fund. So this is all conditional. It will go through the Affiliate Relations Committee again on Friday to walk everyone through the operational procedures and the scoring rubric, and then it will go to the National Board Saturday morning for final approval. But what it is all about a fund that will assist affiliates when there is a disaster in their region and affecting their affiliate operations and the people that reside in their footprint. The assistance will be based on the scale of the disaster's impact to the community. So that means there can be different levels of financial assistance to an affiliate to do some of the work that they need to do. And we know that the affiliate may have to pivot real quickly to redirect resources to assist their community. And that means they may not be able to use grant-funded team members. They may have to move people around and pay people without grant funds and stuff like that to be responsive. It will not cover a situation where the affiliate is reimbursed for by insurance for any damages to the affiliate, nor will it reimburse for any damages incurred by the affiliate's employees. It will cover a number of types of disasters. Certainly natural disasters, but also man-made disasters are vitally important to recognize to be able to be assisted here. It will not assist an affiliate that has a financial disaster because of fundraising or what have you. So that's something that we have to give credit to the subcommittee of affiliate relations that thought that one through, Renee and Paul and Melissa. They were very clear about that. But the way it will work is The applications would be run through the Affiliate Relations Committee. The committee would determine eligibility. And so what this means is, subtle hint, you have to be current on your dues, right, Valerie? To be eligible to receive a award from the Disaster Mental Health Fund. That is not any different from other pass-through grants through national. You ain't current, don't apply. So there you go. The Affiliate Relations Committee would recommend the award amount based on the impact, and those awards could range from $5,000 to $15,000, so that the fund in general can be able to respond to multiple disasters in any given year. Now, the final point that we wanted to make, we did recommend $100,000 to start, but we also wanted to guarantee National's ability to be able to raise additional dollars based on a disaster and what they were doing, allocating funds from the fund to assist an affiliate. So that means National could very well raise money to replenish the fund and thus keep it ongoing year in, year out. And we thought that was a tremendous way to support affiliates and ongoing scenarios that could be natural disasters or man-made disasters. Thank you, Deb.
Don't leave, everybody. Don't leave. Don't leave. You know, it's really amazing coordinating the Regional Policy Council. It's been a great privilege and honor, and I'm so happy to do this. I will thank our sponsors again because they mean a lot to us, and it couldn't happen without them. But I want to thank these individuals again. Please help me in doing so. I also want to let you all know with a little bit of bittersweetness that this is our last Regional Policy Council meeting with Laura as our representative. Laura has done an amazing job, and she continues to do so. And as 988 takes on more and more importance, Laura is doing more and more national work. However, we are not going to lose our 988 advantage. And Shelley Polanco from Vibrant, who is in charge of all the state's stuff, who really knows the stuff deep down in your states, is going to take over for Laura's place as the contract continues with Vibrant Emotional Health. But Laura will be attending our meetings, and Laura will be on our webinars and all that cool kind of stuff. We don't want to get rid of you. And that's right. And Barb will just nag her to be there. And Shelley will be joining us at our next in-person meeting, and we'll be doing a webinar in 2 weeks, and you'll all get information about that. And Ben is going to be one of our speakers, and we're going to talk about how block grants are, how to make the most of your block grant and the most of your Medicaid money. And with the new administration coming in, we know there'll be some changes, so we're going to dive deep into that. And that's December 7th.
And the Planning Council's influence.
And the Planning Councils, which means all you guys. And that's December 17th, is that right, E? December 17th. And then in February the 20th, we're going to be recognizing governors who are mental health champions who've been fabulous. So if your governor is, tell me, tell Alicia, because we want to get that ball rolling. And we know that we will see you, a lot of you, in person in Boston next August. And CSG will tell us where they're going to be next year, and then we'll know where we'll be in December. And I want to do a couple of shout outs. First of all, to all of our, put up my sponsors here again, please, because we couldn't do this without them. So you can all look at them while I tell you, yes, indeed. Thank you. And I want to say thank you to the MHA staff, because this is always a team activity. And without all the people who are here from our national office, we have Valerie and Jenny from our affiliate relations. We have Michael, who makes everything work at MHA. He's been out at the desk all day, so when you walk by, please do say thank you to him. America, who has been around taking pictures all over the place. Jessica Kennedy, are you still in the room? And I want to introduce you to, I don't want to make you blush, but I want to introduce you to Jessica Jackson. We're figuring out the nickname. I think she's going to be Jess J, because we have two Jessicas, and she is for all of our industry partners in the room. She's our new Nate, and she just joined us this week, so we want to give a special welcome to Jessica. And most of all, this meeting would not happen without all the coordination from Alicia Coffey and from Catherine Reynolds. So thank you again to all our sponsors, and thank you for joining us in the really hard work that we all do. So see you soon.
Thank you, Debbie.
You bet.
Thanks, Debbie.